Thanks for joining Florida Court Clerks and Comptrollers for our video series, Off the Cuff with Clerks, where you can tune in to conversations with elected clerks of court and partners from throughout the state.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Cuff with Clerks. I am Patrick Manderfield. I am the Deputy Director of Communications for the Florida Court Clerks and Comptrollers, and today I am joined by Ken Burke. Ken is the Clerk of Court and Comptroller for Pinellas County. He was originally elected by Pinellas voters in November 2004. He was reelected without opposition in 2008, 2012, 2016, and again in 2020. Ken manages all courthouse records, a local budget of approximately $43 million, and more than 500 employees. In addition to serving on several different committees and councils, last year he served as chair of the Guardianship Improvement Task Force. Ken and his wife Cecilia have 3 children, Catherine, Patrick, and Brendan. They welcomed their first grandchild, Anastasia, in July of 2020. Ken, welcome to Off the Cuff of Clerks. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
So today we're just going to talk a little bit about the Guardianship Improvement Task Force. We've got a few questions for you, and then at the end we'll get to a bit of a fun question, okay?
Sounds good.
So are you ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first, to start off, Ken, I was just wondering if you could give us a brief description of the work of the Guardianship Improvement Task Force and who the stakeholders were.
I think, first of all, you would have to look at what has happened in the state of Florida over the past several years. And there's been numerous news stories and media reports on problems in the guardianship area. That doesn't mean all guardianships are bad. Most are operating fine and with integrity, but there's just too darn many where there's problems. As a matter of fact, we published a compilation of some of the stories that we are handing out to legislators to show them of the problems. And this is just a sample of many, many stories we had to select from of problems in the guardianship area, all news stories, all problems in the guardianship area. And so that's been the thing. We know there's problems, and that's why we formed this task force. And the clerks took a leadership role to say, gosh, we need to examine this and come up with recommendations to the legislature to make things better. Then we put together a group of people, and it's the most diverse group that's ever been established in the state of Florida to look at guardianships. We had everyone represented. Veterans Affairs for the state, AARP. We had a former ward who was in guardianship and got out of it. 2 sections of the Florida Bar, the Attorney General's office, 2 legislators, 1 senator, 1 House members, 3 clerks. Just a good variety of people, guardian ad litem, legal aid, all folks who have a keen interest in this and looking to improve the system. And so that was the objective, and that's what we did, is to make legislative recommendations.
Yeah, I know it was a really diverse group, and I know you did a great job as chair trying to manage all the voices in the room a lot of times. And I just want to add that all of the meetings were recorded, and they are available at www.guardianshipimprovementtaskforce.com if anyone's interested in checking those out. So Ken, you mentioned the recommendations. Could you dig in a little bit more there? Could you just tell us a little bit about the recommendations that were made, and then what recommendation was prioritized for legislation this legislative session?
The final work product of the task force is this booklet here, our final report, which we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this 180-some page report to provide a synopsis of what happened during the task force meetings and our work and our eventual recommendations. And the recommendations were not all unanimous because of the divergent points of views, but one rose above all others, and that's the need for data. Unfortunately, we don't collect any statewide data on guardianships. If you were to ask me how many guardianships are active in the state of Florida right now, I couldn't tell you. If you ask me how many are minor guardianships for people under 18, I couldn't tell you. If you ask me how many are for disability folks, I couldn't tell you. If you ask me how many are due to elderly incapacitated, I couldn't tell you. If you ask me how many are full guardianships or some limited guardianships, I couldn't tell you. How many people get out of guardianship due to court cases and so forth, again, couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you if a guardian got into trouble on the discipline record. In one county, got removed from her guardianship or his guardianships. And so that was the biggest cry from the task force is, gosh, we know we have all these stories, which I documented a little bit ago, but do we have real data? And the answer was no. And so our number one priority was to ask the legislature to create a statewide database where a lot of this information can be supplied to, and therefore better decisions can be made in the future. And a lot of the other recommendations, or 9 other recommendations, really stem from the need for data. Use of common forms, examining committees, making sure that they're somewhat consistent around the state, making sure that people who qualify can get out of guardianship if the guardianship is no longer appropriate. So those other recommendations really tie the need for good data so that legislators and courts can make good decisions.
Yeah, and you all did a really great job with the report. It's extremely extensive. And I do just want to say that that report is also available on the website. We'll be sure to link that website in the description of this video.
Thank you.
Ken, if you could you talk a little bit about what kind of impact these bills will have on clerks specifically?
As far as there's going to be some additional reporting responsibilities for clerks, not a significant workload increase, but it's something we have to do. This is something where there's a problem in the state. Clerks can help solve this problem by supplying the data to a statewide database. It's a fairly straightforward database compared to some of the other databases we have are responsible for reporting information, which tend to be very complex. Actually, this one's pretty direct and simple but the importance of it can't be overstated because good decisions can be made. And let me give you an example. We had a guardian who got removed for cause, that means problems, from a guardianship in Pinellas County. That same guardian in another circuit got appointed to the examining committee of that circuit for guardianships by the chief judge. No fault to the chief judge. That chief judge had no idea that guardian was removed from her cases in Pinellas for cause. So that's just egregious, and that needs to be corrected. And we feel that the statewide database can help correct those types of situations.
Gotcha. So Ken, that was really all the questions. Those were the top 3 questions I had for you on guardianship. I did just want to segue as part of Off the Cuff with Clerks. We kind of want to standardize this last question, which is a little bit different from the topic that we're focusing on. What I'd like to ask you, so, clerks are, obviously they've been pretty successful in their careers, and I know how busy you are. So I wondered if you could just shed some light on whether or not you have a morning routine that you typically follow that helps you tackle the day. Do you have something like that you do every morning?
Well, I get into the office right after 8 o'clock, usually around 8:05, and probably like the same thing you do, Patrick, and everyone seems to do. We start reading our email, and the things that we couldn't get to yesterday from our email, we start responding to. Then, of course, you look at your calendar for all the meetings that are scheduled. It's become such a changed world over the past 3 years. A lot of the in-person meetings now are virtual meetings, so we become acquainted with Teams and WebEx and all those other virtual meeting formats. So that's a normal thing, is email, meetings, and then of course, as clerk, you're the leader of your organization, and so the responsibility you have to your good people, all the deputies, the clerks who make your job possible by doing all the work. That's a good portion of my time too, is dedicated to making sure that I'm being a good, hopeful leader for the clerk's office and for the very dedicated employees who make up the clerk's office. And maybe, Patrick, that's a good way to end it, because I came from the private sector back in 2004. I was with a law firm for 20 some years. And the thing that has impressed me the most as clerk is the dedication of the employees of the clerk's office and their knowledge. I can't possibly know the answer to most of the questions of the clerk's office. And so we rely on rank and file employees who have great knowledge of whether it be bail bonds and how the streeters on those work, or the traffic citations and all the intricacies of traffic citations, how many times a person can take a course, whether they need to appear in court, whether they don't need to, setting up payment plans, assigning cases of like nature to the same judge, which ones are of like nature, which ones aren't, the foreclosure process, the tax deed process, issuing financial statements in our finance thing, the public purpose test, new payroll rules. So we rely on a lot of good folks in the clerk's office who are very dedicated, making sure we serve our citizens the best we can, and we also follow the statutes at all times. So I'm just as proud as can be to work with such great people in the Pinellas clerk's office. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, sounds great to me. Well, Ken, thanks again for joining me today for Off the Cuff with Clerks. We look forward to seeing how the task force's recommendations move forward with the rest of the session. So yeah, thanks again, Ken. And that does it for this episode. Thank you for everyone who took time to watch today, and we will see you next time.
Patrick, thank you for having me as a guest. I certainly appreciate it.
Visit flclerks.com/page/video series to check out more Off the Cuff with Clerks videos.